Hello, and welcome to another fantastic training with the Department of Exceptional Students. The topic of this training is the reevaluation process. We will discuss the types of reevaluations and when to choose the appropriate options per IDEA, as well as how each option triggers requirements and next steps in GO-IEP. Reevaluation is a process that occurs on a triennial basis for students who have already established an initial eligibility for Georgia. At any point after the initial eligibility, the team may need to discuss a reevaluation. Reevaluation and re-eligibility are not the same event, and it is important to separate these components. So we will start with the rules to remember. This is true for students who have already established initial eligibility in Georgia. Every evaluation is a re-evaluation. However, every re-evaluation is not an eligibility. Repeating, every evaluation is a re-evaluation. However, every re-evaluation is not an eligibility. Also, when considering any re-evaluation, the team member who is completing the evaluation process, including report and data, must be present and invited to the meeting. In other words, if a consideration is being made for an evaluation for occupational therapy, the OT must be invited to the meeting where all data is considered, the re-evaluation data team review meeting. In order to better make sense of these rules and steps in GO-IEP, we will review the following items which support the reevaluation processes. We will discuss the reasons for referral and reevaluation under IDEA, the referral and consideration processes in CCPS, and observation versus evaluation and reevaluation needs and steps in GO-IEP, along with outcomes. According to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, there are 5 reasons to consider for reevaluation. Those reasons are whether the student continues to be eligible for special education, whether the student needs or continues to need special education and related services, to comprehensively inform the present levels of academic achievement and related developmental needs, to evaluate and determine special education and related services needed to meet measurable annual goals, or to determine if the special education and related services are needed to enable participation as appropriate in the general education setting. Important tips to remember here are that the first 2 reasons impact eligibility. The last 3 reasons impact IEP development. This means that evaluations are completed for several reasons, the 5 indicated above. However, the outcome results in 2 different events, eligibility or development of an IEP. When a reevaluation calls for additional information from a related services team member or support professional, the process does not begin with notifying the team member when a consent is already signed. Once the IEP team is considering a need for evaluation in another area, the process should start with a referral to notify the team member of the current data and the needs which are being considered. The team member, like OT, PT, etc., will review the data and potentially conduct an observation so they can become familiar with the student and be part of the recommending IEP team. The team member, OT, PT, behavior specialist, etc., should be invited to attend the reevaluation data review meeting to share the steps in the evaluation process and the data reviewed with the parent. At this time, the parent must sign a parental consent to evaluate. No evaluations from any team member will be conducted prior to completing the reevaluation data review and obtaining informed, signed parental consent to evaluate. When the case manager or an IEP team member determines that a need for an evaluation consideration could be a next step, prior to calling in a parent and signing an immediate consent, the appropriate team member should be involved. This begins with a request for observation and data review of the student in the area proposed. To complete these steps, the case manager will use the referral request tools on the Teacher Support Hub to request the appropriate referral for observation. The referral notification will be sent to the team member appropriate to that assigned area. The support person will email the case manager directly to advise on next steps, like attending a meeting, etc., or setting up a time to conduct an in-class observation. No direct interaction or evaluation is completed of the student at this time. The purpose of observation is simply to see the student and become familiar with the team. The IEP team will then need to go to a reevaluation data review meeting to discuss the data and evaluation process. The roles in this meeting are that the case manager will share the data and reason for referral, and the team member will inform the parent of the evaluation process, specific tests or assessments that may be conducted. The parent must sign a consent to reevaluate form at that meeting, and a copy must be uploaded to GO-IEP. No evaluations or assessments will be conducted if the parent refuses to sign a consent to evaluate. Look for the section titled Referral Requests in the Teacher Support Hub. To complete a referral in the Teacher Support Hub, go to tinyurl.com/ccpsdes. In this area, you'll scroll down to Referral Requests. These links may switch at different times, so always look for current links because the hub is always under maintenance and new information is added frequently. However, you'll tend to find titles like Behavior Referral Request, Assistive Technology Referral, Considerations, OT Consideration Referral, etc. We're going to use our example today from OT Considerations. So you're going to open the form and it brings up a Google form to complete and answer as your referral process. School, enter your school name, your student, enter the complete name. I'm using a fake one for this video. The area of concern here could be OT, PT, or both. I'm going to select occupational therapy for this student. Enter his date of birth. You can type or use the drop-down calendar. The grade of the student, and the current eligibility areas on their eligibility report. Case manager name is generally your name, and include your email for follow-up information. If you know if the student has any medical diagnosis, they ask for this background. Each referral may ask for different information, but again, the purpose of the referral is to bring in new personnel and give them background information on the student to apply to the data review. So let's say the student has a diagnosis of ADHD. Does the student receive outside private occupational or physical therapy? Yes or no? Yes, OT in private setting. Please indicate if the student receives any of the following services at school. Currently, the child does not receive any related services. This next areas of questions on any of the referrals are to gather the background information regarding the student. In this case, I will say this child is having issues with writing legibility and hand skills, maybe holding a pencil. These are things that relate specifically to writing, which seems to be a common reason for referring for OT. However, occupational therapy and physical therapy cross lines many times, and other areas may be in question. In what setting are these above tasks required? Actually, for the student, probably both. If they're not served in a special education setting, in co-taught all day, for example, general ed would be all that applies. List the strategies and accommodations that we're currently using. Currently, minimal assistance, supervision, we've given some visual cues. Is the student making progress? I'm going to say yes, but it's minimal. And as always, anytime you're making a referral, goals and objectives should currently be in the IEP that would support the needed progress on these goals and objectives. So, since my concerns are with writing, holding a pencil, the goal that I may need to reference in the IEP is student will progress in writing skills to 80% by end of IEP period. This is a terrible example of an IEP, but I wanted to put something in to give you an example of what you would put in here. This would actually need to come directly from the current IEP. If you write in here that there are no current goals and objectives in the IEP to support this needed area, I'm sure you'll know that the next follow-up will encourage the IEP team to go back to the IEP and look at the goals and objectives that are appropriate for the student. What are we requesting? Well, in this case, we're requesting an OT to observe, make recommendations, possibly do an evaluation. We need them to be part of the team for the next steps. And if you need to attach data collection and work samples so that the OT can be involved, you have the ability to add the file here by attaching the file from your computer and scanning in work samples, data elements, etc. If it is not attached, it must be given to the OT when they come to observe or visit. You'll click Submit, and this file will go directly to the occupational therapist, who will reach out to you to set up observation and next steps. In completing all the steps for a reevaluation data review, it is important to know each option in the reevaluation process in GO-IEP and how each option drives the next steps and tasks. Our next steps are to review the reevaluation data review process along with steps in GO-IEP. Remember the rule: every evaluation is a reevaluation. Every reevaluation is not an eligibility. Once the team is ready to assemble and discuss the evaluation needs for the student, the IEP team will set up a reevaluation data review meeting. This process begins on the Timeline tab in GO-IEP. Scroll all the way down to the reevaluation box. There you will see a link, as demonstrated above, that states Start Reevaluation Data Review. Completing the meeting notice on the Meetings tab in GO-IEP is the next step. As the purpose for the meeting is to consider evaluation, parental rights must go home with the parent notice. Ensure all correct team members are outlined on the invitation. At this point, if another area for evaluation is being considered, that team member must be invited to the RDR and involved in the evaluation consideration process. As this referral may involve a new team member, the case manager may need to refer back to the Team Members tab and add the new team member to be able to include them on the parental notification or meeting form. Within a couple of weeks of beginning the referral, the team should be ready to assemble for the reevaluation data review discussion. Once assembled, the case manager will revisit the already created event by clicking on the Eligibility Reevaluation tab and opening the RDR form with the blue button to View Update. The first components of a reevaluation data review, or RDR, is completed the same way that all RDRs are required to be completed. The case manager will choose to add data and input the data elements relative to the child. Remember that these areas require all data to be summarized and readable on this event. No comment should ever be included that simply refers a reader, such as an administrator or parent, back to another event like an old eligibility report or IEP. When adding data for appropriate areas in the RDR, be sure that comments are included for all domains which are pertinent to the existing or current disability areas first, and paint a picture of where the student is currently performing. For example, medical information, background, diagnosis, etc. should be included for a student under OHI or OI eligibilities. Adaptive skills such as dressing and toileting or functional communication areas should be included for students with intellectual disabilities. After ensuring all current eligibility data is included, The team would add any data that supports new information or a reason for referral. The data and comments needed to justify the decision, which will be made in the next section, would all be included in this area. If the IEP team feels that the student needs to remain eligible for current disability categories, then the data information in each of these sections should justify and support the continued progress and reason for continued eligibility. If you have questions about an eligibility for any particular disability category, or an additional area of need is being considered, like possible OT or PT, then the data and comments in each of these sections should justify the need for additional evaluation to obtain more information in those areas. The minutes in the next section would then reflect the discussion points of the data included in these sections. Clayton County procedures require that data information be entered into a minimum of 5 sections of a reevaluation data review. When considering any evaluation type or area, data entered into the report should relate to the area of concern being discussed. This means that if a student is being referred for behavioral concerns and the team is considering an evaluation for a functional behavioral assessment or evaluation as part of the referral, then data from behavior should be entered into the RDR and discussed at the meeting. This data is extremely relevant to the conversation and should be the determining factor in what the team is doing next. All current progress monitoring, classroom data, and notes from the team should be entered into this section. Entering statements like "see psychological report" or "see IEP goals" do not provide adequate information for completion of this report and should not be used. All team members should be able to print a reevaluation with meeting notes and read the information with comprehensive data discussed without having to refer to another form, evaluation report, or notes. To watch the steps of the reevaluation data review in action, visit the YouTube link that you see on your screen to watch a screen capture for each of the steps in GO-IEP. The last step that is discussed in an RDR meeting is to make an appropriate recommendation for next steps. At any reevaluation data review meeting, there are now 3 options to choose for the team to make a recommendation. Only one of the 3 options can be chosen, and this defines the next steps for the team members. The case manager and IEP team members must carefully consider the data and choose the appropriate next steps, as follow-up may be required to close out the process, and each team member must know their responsibilities for completion and the time frame for due dates. As you have seen the entire process and know that we must select an option, let's thoroughly review each of the options in a reevaluation data review. First, option A. Option A aligns to the first 2 reasons discussed in IDEA for reevaluation. This is what IEP team members commonly know as re-eligibility because choosing this option requires a comprehensive evaluation of the student and will lead to evaluation reports and an eligibility event and report. In choosing option A, the team is stating that additional assessments are being requested to determine whether the student is eligible for special education or in need of special education and related services. This option is used to consider comprehensive data for a new eligibility area to assess and potentially remove or change one or more eligibility areas if the student is progressing, like speech, or to consider exit from special education services altogether. If the team agrees that a comprehensive evaluation is needed to redetermine appropriate eligibility areas, then the next box will open up to request more information. The team must select at least one area of concern that was noted in the data discussed for evaluation so that the evaluation team can focus on that during the evaluation process. Though the evaluation may be comprehensive, this information should help the IEP team drive specific assessments that may be used to provide what is needed back to the IEP team. The new 3-year reevaluation cycle will not begin until the new full eligibility report is completed. So once the RDR is completed, each team member in the evaluation team has a task to complete in order to bring the team back together and finish the eligibility. Follow-up and understanding of the due date is required. When the IEP team reconvenes and completes the eligibility event, the date of the new full eligibility report will be completed and reported in student record to close the events for this student. An important follow-up on this option. Once the re-eligibility event is completed, the IEP must also be updated. An amendment IEP or a new annual review meeting must be done in order to update the current assessment information and include data from the eligibility report. It is also required immediately if the eligibility areas change. The eligibility areas will not reflect as changed in the system until the new IEP is completed. GO-IEP does not currently have an audit to remind the user that this change is needed. However, the reporting system will not show a change in disability, as again, this has to be done in the IEP. When reconvening for the eligibility meeting, the team must also expect to update the IEP in an amendment or annual review at the same time, or complete a full annual review meeting ASAP, so please plan accordingly. The second option during this meeting supports all the reasons for reevaluation in IDEA. However, in choosing option B, the team is stating that the current classroom data, progress monitoring, and updates match what is occurring consistently and included in the last evaluation report. Option B is chosen when the team feels that no additional information is needed to update the IEP. The current progress monitoring and data is sufficient to show that the student would remain eligible for special education and related services in the same eligibility areas. Because the team is agreeing that the student is progressing with all of the same areas based on the current data, this is used when no areas will need to be changed or considered for eligibility. Disability categories cannot be changed. The student will remain eligible in these areas for the next 3 years unless the IEP team meets sooner and considers a different option. Option B is a true continued eligibility based on data. This is not a waiver of eligibility, and this term should not be used. A continued eligibility states that the team review the data as indicated in the data review event and use data to determine that no additional information is needed and the student continues to qualify for services. It is extremely important to note that the student will remain eligible for all of the same disability categories based on this data review. If the team comes together and feels that the student needs supports for a specific learning disability in math, and the data supports continuing, however, the student has made progress in speech and language, and more information is needed as the student may not continue to qualify, then option B should not be used. Choosing to evaluate in even one area of disability to determine eligibility is a comprehensive evaluation, and option A should be chosen instead. Once the reevaluation data review event is finalized using option B, this will complete the reevaluation and re-eligibility process. This event must be finalized in GO-IEP, and once finalized, this becomes the eligibility report for the student, supporting the decision to continue with those eligibility areas. This date is reported as the eligibility date in student record reporting, and a new 3-year due date will be determined based on the date of completion and finalization of the RDR with option B. At this point, the IEP may or may not need to be updated since no changes were made. If the IEP data is current and matches the reevaluation data review, the team can continue. An amendment IEP may be needed to update information, or a new annual review may be needed if the IEP is older and updates are warranted at this time. Option C is the last option in our reevaluation data review event to review and discuss. Option C is used only when the committee feels that the IEP team needs additional information through an evaluation report. However, the eligibility areas are still current and the evaluation will inform services, related services, or supports in the IEP itself. These choices support the last three reasons for reevaluation given in IDEA. Information that requires an evaluation report but is used to inform the IEP team and not an eligibility area are generally regarding related services and/or accommodations. Examples of this may include an evaluation of fine motor skills to determine appropriate OT services and supports, an evaluation of gross motor skills to determine if physical therapy is needed, an evaluation of appropriate assistive technology supports to determine accommodations and interventions for classroom use or assessment, or maybe a functional behavioral assessment to determine the most appropriate behavioral interventions to add to a behavior intervention plan and goals in the IEP. This list is not exhaustive. However, the IEP team should remember the basic rules with Option C. Option C is a continued eligibility, meaning the disability and eligibility areas are supported and will not change. However, the team needs a consent to evaluate signed and a new assessment with evaluation report from a team member, like mentioned, to inform the IEP team and better provide resources and supports to the student. When choosing Option C, the team must select at least one area that is being evaluated. The team can choose more than one area to be evaluated. However, keep in mind that each area chosen will require an appropriate team member to complete evaluation and finalize that process through an evaluation report. The report will be uploaded to GO-IEP and the information will be added to the appropriate sections of the IEP to update that information. Examples of appropriate referrals for evaluation, team members, and evaluation report results are listed on this slide. Assistive technology would result in a specialized AT evaluation report completed by the AT specialist. Communication or speech language would result in a speech evaluation report completed by the speech therapist. Please keep in mind that this option only continues the eligibility and cannot be used to dismiss a child from speech. If the team feels that an evaluation for speech and language is needed to consider possible dismissal of services, then a comprehensive evaluation, or Option A, should be chosen. It is very important that the team does not select an area that is not currently being referred, as each area selected will require a full evaluation report and will be prompted for follow-up in the next IEP meeting to document the completion of the evaluation. Please use only the selected and highlighted options on this slide with the examples given. If you are considering any other area for a specialized evaluation, please refer to and speak with your LTSE prior to completing a reevaluation data review event. Option C is again a continued eligibility, which will inform the IEP process. This means that the next step will take the team members back to an IEP event. When finalizing any future IEPs until all evaluations are completed, GO-IEP will show a new field above meeting notes in the IEP for reevaluation process. The reevaluation process is considered to be completed when, in either a single annual IEP or amendment or in a series of IEPs or amendments, all areas selected in the reevaluation data review as needing to be evaluated have been checked in this field as completed and evaluated. The date of the IEP meeting, which completes the evaluation process, will be reported in the student record and on the timeline as the new eligibility date, and the new 3-year cycle will begin. Finalizing this event is the same as all other reevaluation data review meetings. The link to access the consent to evaluate letter is always available. If Option A was selected, the link will appear on the timelines page to start reevaluation eligibility. The reevaluation eligibility process will look almost exactly like an initial eligibility. The student will appear in a pending eval report. This evaluation should be completed within a reasonable time period. If option B was selected, a link will appear on the timelines page to start reevaluation data review when it is time to do that. If option C was selected, there will not be an active link for reevaluation on the timeline page, but GO-IEP will show a placeholder with the phrase reevaluation in process to be documented in the IEP. The student will appear in a pending eval report, and this evaluation should be completed within a reasonable time period. If option C was selected, in the next IEP, you will need to indicate which areas requested for evaluation have been completed and documented in the IEP. All areas in which an evaluation is requested in the data review will show in this IEP field. Check the areas for which the evaluation was completed and results are documented in the IEP. Any areas not marked in the first IEP or amendment will show in the next IEP or amendment and will, in order to be completed and marked as completed. The reevaluation process will only be completed and reported in student record once all areas indicated as needing evaluation have been marked as completed in the IEP. GO-IEP will audit by saying the category of blank is checked for reevaluation information, but no new information has been provided for that category in the present levels of performance. This audit will be seen if there is nothing entered in the present levels for that category, and also there is no assessment date for that category greater than or equal to the meeting date on which the evaluation was requested. Staff should continue to do IEPs or IEP amendments when needed as portions or all of the evaluations are completed. GO-IEP will track categories evaluated over multiple annual reviews or amendments until all are completed. Once all evaluation areas are complete, the reevaluation process will finalize. The date of the most recent IEP that is reporting the evaluation data will be listed as the evaluation date for reporting purposes. In the header of this eligibility, which completes the process, the event will be called Reevaluation Results in the IEP. After the IEP, which completed the reevaluation process, has been finalized, GO-IEP will show a link to start reevaluation data review. On the Eligibility tab, the user will see a mock reevaluation named Reevaluation Results in the IEP, as shown on this screen. It will be dated the same date as the IEP, which was completed in the reevaluation process, and the 3-year reevaluation due date will be based upon that date. This will complete your reevaluation process for option C. GO-IEP will show the same disabilities inside the mock reevaluation as the completion of the event always continues the same eligibility areas. In addition to documenting the results of all evaluations completed in the IEP, remember that you must also complete and provide the parent with an evaluation report for all evaluations completed. Documenting the results only in the IEP will not be adequate because IDEA may allow for an eligibility report to be comprehensive enough to serve as an evaluation report. However, it does not allow for an IEP report to serve as an evaluation report. The parent will receive a copy of an evaluation report for each area evaluated. As a final reminder, this slide completes the reevaluation process options for A, B, and C, and we will indicate next steps in GO-IEP. The form should guide you through the process. The draft and final print of the reevaluation data review form will print with some additional information to include 3 years of enrollment history in Georgia, 3 years of attendance history in Georgia, any prior state testing results, a list of services currently included in the student's IEP, if it was done in GO, and a list of behaviors that are addressed in a student's behavior intervention plan, if it is currently done in GO. Thank you for your time and attention to this presentation today. If you have any questions, please contact the LTSC assigned to your school or Special Education Support Administrator. Don't forget, you can find links to this resource as well as process, procedure guides, forms, and continually expanding training materials on our Teacher Support Hub at tinyurl.com/ccpsdes.